It all began with a love story, one that felt like it was straight out of a movie. Emma Caldwell was the kind of person who lit up a room with her laugh, the kind who made everyone feel like they were the most important person in the world. She was passionate about art, life, and love, and it was impossible not to be drawn to her warm heart. Sarah Mitchell, on the other hand, was quieter, more reserved. But there was a fire inside her that Emma noticed the moment they met. It wasn't love at first sight, but it was something deeper, something that grew over time. Their first meeting was casual, at a mutual friend's party, but it wasn't long before they couldn't stay away from each other. Emma admired Sarah's intellect and how she always seemed to know what to say, while Sarah was captivated by Emma's boundless energy and infectious positivity. The two spent more and more time together, discovering shared passions, late-night conversations, and walks through Portland's vibrant streets. It was the kind of love that built slowly, strong, steady, and real. They moved in together after just 6 months, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Their engagement came in the most unexpected way. On a rainy night in November 2018, Emma had planned a quiet dinner at home. As Sarah reached for a glass of wine, she turned around to find Emma on one knee, holding a small, velvet box. Without hesitation, Sarah said yes, laughing through her tears as she hugged Emma tight. That night, they dreamed of a future together, one filled with travel, laughter, and happiness. They were married the following summer in a small ceremony in Portland, surrounded by close friends and family. Lisa, Emma's best friend, was the maid of honor, standing by Emma's side as she exchanged vows with the love of her life. The wedding was perfect, a reflection of their relationship, joyful, full of life, and full of promise. Lisa Daniels was always there. She was Emma's best friend long before Sarah came into the picture. The two had met in college, both studying English literature, and their bond had been instant. While Emma was the outgoing one, Lisa was more reserved but equally passionate. They bonded over their love of books, their shared sarcastic humor, and their ability to talk about anything and everything for hours. Lisa had been a quiet observer of Emma and Sarah's relationship from the start. She had seen them fall in love, watched as they built a life together, and was there for every milestone, including the wedding. But she never could have predicted how much her life would change because of Emma's disappearance. Even after Emma married Sarah, Lisa remained a constant in their lives, their trio a perfect balance. While Sarah's introversion complemented Emma's outgoing nature, Lisa often found herself in the middle, her own quiet support pulling them both together during the tough times, offering her advice when they needed it most. Then, everything changed. March 22, 2021, Emma simply vanished. There were no signs of struggle, no messages, no trace of where she went. Sarah's initial response was oddly calm, too calm for anyone's liking. She waited 2 days before notifying the authorities, leaving many wondering why she didn't act sooner. Lisa couldn't believe it. She hadn't seen Emma in a couple of days, but it wasn't unusual. They were both busy, and Emma was known to occasionally disappear into her art for days at a time. But this? This was different. Emma wouldn't just leave without a word. Lisa knew something was wrong, but she had no way of knowing just how wrong things were about to get. The police scoured the city, searching for Emma. But everything came up empty. Then, Sarah's behavior became more suspicious. Witnesses placed her near Forest Park, where Emma's car had been found abandoned. Sarah wasn't talking much, but every time she did, the details didn't quite add up. The more the police investigated, the more they started to question Sarah's involvement. It didn't take long before Sarah was arrested, accused of murdering Emma and burying her body in the woods. The evidence against her was overwhelming. Emma's blood was found in their house. Fingerprints on Emma's personal items were Sarah's. The jury convicted Sarah of murder, and she was sentenced to 25 years in prison. But Sarah never admitted guilt. She maintained that she didn't kill her wife, that Emma's disappearance was a mystery, and she was the one who had been wronged. This left the community divided, some trusting in Sarah's word and feeling pity for her while some see her as a cold-blooded murderer. But fate has a way of surprising the world. 3 years later, Lisa was sitting at home when she heard a knock on her door. Expecting a delivery, she opened it, and there, standing before her, was Emma. Alive. Pale. Shaking. Emma? How is this possible? I thought you were dead. Lisa cried, her voice breaking as she pulled her friend into a tight embrace. I was taken, Emma whispered. I've been gone for 3 years. Lisa calmed her down, feed her and make her feel relaxed, but Emma was restless. They find their way to the police station where Emma narrate all that happened in those 3 years. Emma's story was nothing short of shocking. She explained how she had been abducted by James Kessler, a man with a dark past, who had been stalking her for months. Kessler had become obsessed with Emma after seeing her at a local gallery event. He was a dangerous man, known for his violent tendencies, and had fixated on her after a fleeting interaction at the event. Emma didn't know this at the time, but Kessler had been watching her and Sarah for months, studying their routines. He had a twisted obsession with their life, particularly the love they shared, which he believed was somehow his to destroy. Kessler believed that by taking Emma away, he could ruin Sarah's life, forcing her to relive the pain of losing her in a way she never could have imagined. To execute his mission he needs a plan, and Hannah Brooks fall prey of his evil scheme. Hannah Brooks was the kind of woman who often went unnoticed. She wasn't famous or particularly well known, but she had an air of quiet elegance that made her stand out in a subtle way. Living in Portland, she worked as a librarian at a local university, spending her days surrounded by books and her nights in the quiet company of her own thoughts. She was a private person, content with her simple life, and she had a few close friends who admired her for her gentle, caring nature, but everything about Hannah's life would change when she became entangled in a web spun by someone she never even knew. James Kessler's obsession with Emma Caldwell went unnoticed by everyone, except for the few who knew him well. He had been lurking on the fringes of Emma's life for months, stalking her from a distance. At first, it seemed harmless, just a man admiring a woman from afar. But that harmless fascination quickly turned into something darker. James was consumed by jealousy and anger at the happiness Emma shared with Sarah. He couldn't bear the thought of Emma having a life that didn't involve him, so he began researching her. He learned everything he could about her, where she went, what she did, and who she spent time with. Emma's best friend, Lisa, became a part of that research, as did Sarah, Emma's wife. But what James hadn't anticipated was the chance encounter with Hannah Brooks. James Kessler wasn't always a monster. At least, that's what people told themselves. Born and raised in Portland, James was the kind of child no one really noticed. He was quiet, withdrawn, never quite fit in. But those who knew him best, his teachers, his neighbors, his mother, could sense something was off. It wasn't that he was violent. He rarely got into trouble. He was just different. The kind of different that made people uneasy. He had no close friends. No childhood bonds. No one ever invited him over to play, and he never seemed to care. While other kids were out riding bikes or playing sports, James preferred solitude. He would sit in his room for hours, meticulously organizing his few belongings. Everything had to be perfect. His books lined up in height order. His clothes folded exactly the same way. His mother once moved something on his desk, a simple act of cleaning. James didn't yell. He didn't cry. He simply stood there, staring at her with cold, empty eyes. Don't touch my things, he said. His voice was flat. Emotionless, she never touched them again. By the time James reached high school, his odd behavior only grew more unsettling. He didn't date. Didn't go to prom. Never showed interest in anyone, until the day he did. Her name was Rebecca Sawyer, and she barely knew he existed, but James knew everything about her. He memorized her schedule. Knew when she worked her shifts at the local diner. Watched as she laughed with her friends, completely unaware of his presence. For months, he followed her from a distance. Never close enough to be seen, but always there. Always watching. Then, one night, Rebecca vanished. The investigation went nowhere. No witnesses. No evidence. No sign of a struggle, just, gone. James was never questioned. No one suspected him. After all, he wasn't the kind of guy who did things like that, right? The truth was, Rebecca's disappearance wasn't a random crime. It was practice. James had finally tested what it felt like to take control of someone's life. And he liked it that he held Rebecca captive for weeks, feeding off her fear, learning from her pain, but eventually, she became boring. So he ended it. Rebecca's body was never found, and James, he moved on. The birth of an obsession. For years, James kept a low profile. He worked odd jobs, never stayed in one place too long. People who met him forgot him just as quickly, but then, in the fall of 2020, he saw Emma Caldwell at an art gallery, and something inside him clicked. She was beautiful, yes. But it wasn't just her looks that drew him in, it was her energy. The way she carried herself. The way people gravitated toward her. She was everything James wasn't, and he hated her for it. At first, it was small things. Watching her from a distance. Learning her routine. Finding out where she lived, but the more he learned, the more obsessed he became. Emma was happy. Emma was loved. Emma belonged to someone else, and that was unacceptable. It wasn't until one chilly evening in February 2021 that James first saw Hannah at a local coffee shop. She looked strikingly similar to Emma, dark hair, soft features, and a similar build. To anyone else, she might have blended into the crowd, but to James, it was like a sign. In his twisted mind, Hannah became the perfect replacement for Emma. James knew that the best way to hurt Emma and Sarah would be to make Emma disappear. But it wasn't enough to just kill her. He wanted to erase her from existence completely, leaving no trace behind. He couldn't let them ever find her. Hannah Brooks, with her uncanny resemblance to Emma, became an unknowing pawn in James's cruel plan. He began to stalk Hannah, following her around, learning her routine, and even making small talk in passing at the coffee shop where they'd met. Hannah, completely unaware of James's dark intentions, thought of him as just another lonely stranger. What she didn't know was that he was planning to kidnap her, kill her, and use her body as a stand-in for Emma. In early March 2021, James's plan came to fruition. He ambushed Hannah, kidnapping her from a quiet street near her apartment. He held her captive for days, torturing her both physically and emotionally, before he ultimately ended her life. James meticulously staged her death to resemble Emma's. He covered her in Emma's clothes, made sure the scene was set just like the one Sarah would find when she came home. His goal was simple: make it look like Emma had died, and then disappear into the background as if nothing had ever happened. But the truth was far more complicated than anyone realized. Emma Caldwell had always been a fighter. A dreamer. A woman full of life, but in the instant James Kessler wrapped a cloth over her mouth and dragged her into the darkness, everything she was, everything she had built, vanished. The night she was taken was like any other. She had been walking home from an art gallery, her mind lost in ideas for her next piece. It was late, but Portland had always felt safe to her. She had taken this same route 100 times before. She had no reason to be afraid, until she heard footsteps behind her. She barely had time to turn before a sharp pain exploded at the back of her head. The world tilted. Darkness swallowed her. When she woke up, she wasn't in Portland anymore. She was tied to a chair in a small, windowless room. The walls were bare, the air stale, and the only sound was the slow, deliberate breathing of the man sitting across from her, James Kessler. She didn't recognize him at first, but he spoke to her like they had known each other forever. Like she was supposed to remember him. "I've been waiting for this," he had whispered, almost reverently. "You and I, we have a story to finish." Emma didn't know what he meant. Not then. But as the days blurred into weeks, she learned the horrifying truth: James had been watching her. Watching her for months. She had never noticed him at the gallery that night, never realized that a passing conversation had sparked an obsession in his mind. While she was laughing with friends, living her life, James was studying her, tracking her habits, learning her routines, planning every moment of her disappearance. And now, she belonged to him, the prison that became her world. For months, Emma was trapped in a basement. The walls were concrete, the only light coming from a dim, flickering bulb. The air was damp, thick with the smell of mold and dust. There was a mattress in the corner, a bucket in place of a bathroom. And a heavy metal door that only opened when he wanted it to. James was careful. He never let her see where they were. Never let her get close to a window. The first few weeks, he barely spoke to her. He would bring her food at odd hours, sometimes skipping meals just to watch her grow weaker. Other times, he would sit in the corner and watch her, saying nothing, his dark eyes unblinking, and then, the worst began that he started erasing her. He cut her hair, chopped it off in jagged, uneven pieces, laughing when she flinched. He took her clothes and replaced them with others, dull, colorless things that weren't hers. He forced her to stop using her name. "You're not Emma anymore," he told her. "Emma is dead." The first time she fought back, he locked her in complete darkness for 3 days. No food. No water. Just her own breath and the suffocating silence. She learned quickly, the attempts to escape. She tried to run. Of course, she did. The first time, she managed to slip through the door when James got careless. She made it as far as the trees outside, a dense, unfamiliar forest, before he tackled her to the ground. That night, he tied her to the bed frame with a length of rope and whispered in her ear, "Try that again, and I'll bury you alive." The second time, she sharpened a broken piece of metal and waited for the right moment. She slashed at him, leaving a deep gash on his arm. He didn't even scream. He just looked at her, disappointed. "Don't make me hurt you, Emma." But he did, not in ways that left bruises. James was too smart for that, but in ways that made her wish for death. He made her sit in freezing water for hours, her body trembling so hard she thought her bones might shatter. He left her isolated for days, the silence driving her to the brink of madness, and worst of all, he told her about the body they found. "The one they buried." "She looks just like you," he had said, almost admiringly. "And now the world thinks you're gone. Even your wife." That was when Emma truly felt herself break, because Sarah, her Sarah, believed she was dead. The moment of hope. Time lost meaning. Was it a year? 2? She didn't know, but then, something changed. James started leaving for longer periods. He would disappear for days, returning with a fresh cut or bruised knuckles. She never asked where he had been, but she knew, he was doing this to someone else. And then, one night, he didn't come back. Emma waited. Hours turned into a full day. Then too that her stomach ached from hunger, but she forced herself to move. She searched every inch of the basement, fingers scraping against the walls until, finally, she found it. A loose panel behind an old shelf. It took everything she had to squeeze through the opening, to crawl through the dark passage beyond. When she finally saw daylight, her legs nearly gave out. She was in the middle of nowhere. A cabin, buried deep in the Oregon wilderness, and she ran, barefoot. Starving. Weak. But she ran. It took her 2 days to reach civilization. 2 days of hiding from strangers, of drinking from muddy streams, of pushing herself beyond what she thought was possible, and when she finally reached Lisa's doorstep, trembling and exhausted, she could barely force the words out. I was taken. The weight of survival. Emma's return didn't bring relief. Not at first. Because with her came the horrifying truth. Hannah Brooks had died in her place. A woman she had never met. A woman whose life had been stolen just because she looked like her. The guilt crushed her. And Sarah. The woman she had loved, the woman who had suffered 3 years in prison for a crime she hadn't committed. What could Emma even say to her? The reunion wasn't the way Emma had dreamed. Sarah didn't run to her, didn't pull her into her arms. She just stared. Hollow. Broken, because the world had moved on without Emma, because survival wasn't the end of the story. It was just another beginning. Hannah had no idea what was happening to her. She had been trapped in a house, forced to impersonate someone else, someone who had a life, a future, and people who loved her. Hannah's last moments were filled with confusion and terror, knowing that she had no control over what was happening. She was a victim of James's twisted obsession with Emma, and her life was tragically cut short as a result. When authorities recovered what they believed to be Emma Caldwell's remains, the case seemed closed. The body was found in a shallow grave deep in Forest Park, wrapped in a tarp, decomposed but intact enough for initial identification. Sarah Mitchell was convicted swiftly, her protests of innocence drowned by the overwhelming circumstantial evidence. The world moved on, but science doesn't lie. 3 years after Sarah's conviction, a forensic analyst working on an unrelated cold case came across something strange. A routine check in the National DNA Database flagged an anomaly. The DNA taken from Emma's supposed remains didn't match Emma Caldwell. It was a chilling revelation that sent shockwaves through the department. The coroner, who had conducted the original autopsy, was immediately brought back in. Had there been a mistake? A clerical error? A mix-up with another case? But as they reopened the case file, one thing became horrifyingly clear: the woman buried in Emma's place was not Emma Caldwell, she was Hannah Brooks. A name no one had ever connected to the case. A woman with no apparent ties to Sarah, Emma, or their lives. Yet, there she was, buried in Emma's grave, wrapped in Emma's clothes. Authorities scrambled to retrace their steps. How had they missed this? How had an innocent woman been mistaken for someone she wasn't? But as they pieced together Hannah's life, her job at the university library, her quiet routines, her lack of known enemies, they realized she had one fatal thing in common with Emma: she looked just like her. The revelation sent law enforcement into a frenzy. If the woman in the grave wasn't Emma, then where was Emma? And more importantly, who had really killed Hannah Brooks? The discovery reopened the case, but there were no answers, until the knock on Lisa Daniels' door changed everything. Hannah's death left a void in the lives of her friends and family. They mourned a woman who was taken from them so violently and for a reason they could never understand. The shock of her death also caused ripples throughout the community, as people struggled to comprehend how someone so kind and peaceful could be caught up in such a monstrous plot. Her family and friends were devastated, but it wasn't until Emma's return that they learned the full extent of the horror she had endured. Hannah, an innocent woman, had died because of Emma's life, because of someone's twisted obsession. When Emma finally returned after 3 years in hiding, her revelation about Hannah's death was heart-wrenching. She explained to Lisa and the police that James Kessler had kidnapped her, not because he wanted to love her or keep her for himself, but because he wanted to destroy her life and the life of the woman she loved. Hannah Brooks had been the collateral damage in his mission to erase Emma from existence. Emma's grief over Hannah's death was palpable. She couldn't help but wonder if things might have been different if she had known someone like Hannah existed in the world. A stranger's life, completely ruined by someone she had never met. Hannah was just another innocent victim caught in the web of obsession. To everyone else, the case was closed, and Emma was gone for good. No one suspected foul play in the grave because Kessler had made it look like Emma. He had thought that by the time anyone found out, it would be too late. He had no idea Emma would escape, and that she would eventually return to expose the truth. The authorities launched a new investigation. Kessler was eventually found and arrested. His confession was chilling. He had kidnapped Emma, killed Hannah, and staged the scene to make it look like Emma had died. He admitted to his obsession with Emma and his need to destroy everything she had with Sarah. Sarah, who had spent 3 years in prison for a crime she didn't commit, was released. But the damage was done. She had lost her freedom, and the emotional scars ran deep. Emma, too, had been forever changed by the horrors she endured during those years of captivity: the love, the loss, the lies, and the truth that no one saw coming. It's a story that reminds us of the power of the human spirit, of the deep bonds we form, and the incredible twists life can take. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more real-life mysteries. What do you think really happened that night? Was Sarah guilty? Or was she the true victim? Leave your theories below.